what you have right now is sort of an unconditional support for whichever madness seems to be the official direction of politics and military, and you have almost no criticism again. You have people who are criticizing, or even people who are analyzing what's going on. They are being shunned, they are being attacked. And isn't it interesting what you said, that there was professional study in the Cold War of how Russia works, right? That people were trying to understand Russia. Right now, it has become a smear word if you have intellectuals who say, I think I understand what Vladimir Putin thinks, what he wants. I understand his strategy. That in German, you have this word Putin verstehe. It's just someone who understands Putin. And that is a smear word. That is to put someone down, where in fact it should be a highly valued profession.
Hello everybody, this is Pascal from Neutrality Studies, and today I'm talking again to Dr. Jonas Tögel, a German propaganda researcher working for the Institute for Psychology at the University of Regensburg. He's the author of the German-language books War Games, How NATO and the Pentagon Simulate the Destruction of Europe, and Cognitive Warfare, the latest manipulation techniques as a NATO weapon category. Jonas, welcome back to the channel.
Hello Pascal, it's a pleasure talking to you again.
Yeah, pleasure talking to you too. Last time we did the conversation in German, but we said this time we're gonna cater to our English language audience mainly. So we're gonna speak in English. And I just want to point out that for the German speakers, you are actually now also doing your own German language channel on YouTube, where you actually started analyzing propaganda in the German TV media. When did you start this?
That was a couple of months ago, where sort of it happened with, or it all started with me criticizing a part of a German Dreisat. It is, it's state media, so to speak, and there was coverage on a war, basically, or the mobilization of German military. And we now have, young boys and girls who are possibly being recruited into the army. And there was a TV show on this, and there was one person on the show who said that, well, what is lacking in Germany and in Europe is the will of the parents to sacrifice their children. And that sort of was what got me into this propaganda analysis. I watched the whole episode and I took this part out, and I said, well, this is an example of blatant war propaganda. This reminds me personally, and I know many people who've heard it thought the same. It reminds me of, well, the darkest times of German history, that you say, parents need to be willing to sacrifice their children again for the greater good, so to speak. And then the filmmakers, they criticized me, they approached me. I got an angry email, sort of, how dare you criticize our media coverage, and you haven't understood it at all, and you probably haven't watched it. So that was like the comments that I got. I was attacked on X as well. And I had watched the whole episode, and I thought, well, okay, I'm going to make an analysis of this short film that they made, and it was like 15 minutes, and I analyzed it in detail. I uploaded it on my channel, and there was quite some feedback. I got a lot of positive feedback, a lot of emails, and it's great to see that a lot of people have understood that there is war propaganda, which is a very important first step to understanding what is going on, to be ready for this constantly ongoing battle for our hearts and minds. And I got a lot of positive feedback, and people asked me, well, could you analyze this? Could you analyze that? And I had a lot of intelligent feedback from people who are very smart, very, aware of what's happening. And they said, well, look at this, please look at that. And well, another request that I had was that I should please look at the German news, the biggest news that we have in Germany. That is the Tagesschau, that is broadcast at 8 p.m. And it has roughly 10 million people on average every day who watch the Tagesschau. So I said to myself, well, I haven't watched it for a long time, because it just gives you a bad mood. You have like 50 minutes, death, destruction, corruption, war, crimes, whatever. And, it's not healthy, I'd say. It's not good for your mood. And so I said to myself, I'm going to do this now. I'm going to watch 1 week of Tagesschau, and I'm going to try and use sort of my glasses, my analytical tools for detecting propaganda. And I had to stop after 3 days of watching the Tagesschau. So we had 45 minutes of these news coverages, because there was so much material that I thought, okay, if I'm going to do 1 whole week, it's going to be too much. And so that was the second analysis. And once again, feedback was very positive. And what I could show, and that was for me also a surprise, not having watched the Tagesschau for such a long time, was that how cleverly, but also how blatant. Yeah, and how blatant the war propaganda actually is in the most viewed German news broadcast that we have in this country, and that's supposed to be a neutral German information tool for the public to be aware, to be educated. And we have this part where we have, when it comes to what I looked at was there was a meeting between Trump and Zelensky, and it starts very neutrally. And then in the aftermath, you have a lot of framing, you have a lot of one-directional news coverage. And it was sort of, well, how dare we, think of peace? Of course, we want peace. Yeah, we always have to say, of course, we want peace. But, and then in this but, you have the whole package of Russia is the aggressor. It doesn't want peace. It's still killing people. Then you have these heart-wrecking, these moving images of civilians who are being killed, of buildings who are being destroyed. But it's all the Russians who are doing this. Then you have experts who say, well, the demands of Russia in these peace negotiations, they are exaggerated and they want way too much, and it's an insolence, and no one could ever agree to their terms. And so we have to keep sending weapons to Ukraine. We have to keep fighting. And then you start to realize, and I'm sorry if I'm taking too long on this answer, but that is what really moved me. And what I understood was that you have to realize that the news coverage cannot be considered isolated from what is going on the geopolitical landscape. So you have to take into account the geopolitical landscape. And if you look at what is going on at the moment, I mean, in this Ukraine conflict, you have a couple of actors who are more or less, you could say, rational. You have Russia, which is acting more or less rationally, because the Russians say, okay, we have NATO expansion eastwards, and we have to draw a red line somewhere. And it's always been clear that for the Russians, a possible NATO membership of Ukraine is a red line, because then you have possible missile systems and soldiers, etc., very close to their border. We know now, because of news coverage of the New York Times, that there were roughly a dozen CIA covert bases in Ukraine operating right at the border. So this could have been a possible reason for the war. So for the Russians, it's clear they have a red line where they say geopolitically, we can't no longer tolerate this. We had the coup d'etat 2014 in Ukraine. We know that on your channel, this has been abundantly discussed. So for the Russians, it is rational and it is in their own interests. It is brutal, it's illegal, but it's rational to say, okay, we have to stop this, we have to react, and we want to prevent Ukraine from being a possible NATO member. Then we have Ukraine, which is also acting more or less rationally, because they say we are attacked and we have to defend ourselves. It's not each and every Ukrainian who says that, because we know that in Germany alone, we have 200,000 men who could fight in the war, who say, we don't want to give our lives for this madness. We just want to live. And this is absolutely understandable. So this side exists as well. But from the Ukrainian side to say, well, we want to continue, we want to defend ourselves, this is more or less rational. Whether Zelensky is a rational actor, I would hardly doubt that. But still, this part could be understood. Then we have the Americans, and they say, okay, we have tried to weaken Russia as best as we could. We have tried to isolate Russia internationally. We have, we have spent a lot of money to try and weaken Russia. And all this is understandable as well. And now they say, well, we need this pivot to Asia. Our upcoming biggest contender won't be Russia, it's going to be China. So let's get out of this conflict. We cannot win this one. And let's withdraw and let's try to, regroup our forces and be ready for the conflict, the coming conflict with China. That's rational. And the only actor in this whole conflict, and that is directly reflected in what the media are telling, is Germany and is Europe. It is, from my point of view, and I know that many spectators share the same view, is that is complete madness. The Europeans are the only ones who say that what our great plan is to keep this war going because it's a war for democracy and for freedom, and we are being directly, as Germans, as Europeans, we are being directly threatened by an imperialist Russia, which just, wants to expand and wants to probably take over Berlin. That's what some German politicians say. And this is, and you say, okay, so what's your plan? Well, our plan is to continue the support of Ukraine. Really? So is that working well? Well, there's maybe 1 million, maybe more Ukrainians dead already, but we think it's going to work out. We just sent more weapons. Really? So what's your end goal? Well, our end goal is to defeat Russia. And you say, well, really? You want to defeat the biggest nuclear power on this planet? You think that's a good idea? Well, we don't know, but we're just going to keep going. So that's sort of the battle plan. And what Europeans don't realize is that in the end, if this war continues and if it possibly escalates, it's not going to be the Americans who are being destroyed. It's not going to be the mainland of the USA. It's also not going to be the mainland of Russia. But this war, all the destruction is going to take place in Europe. So it's our future which is at stake. It's our survival which is at stake. So this is also what moves me when I'm analyzing this propaganda. I don't understand what the Europeans are doing at the moment. I don't understand what the Germans are doing at the moment. In my opinion, it's gambling with one's own destruction, and the whole narrative that is being repeated over and over again, and that is sort of being hammered into the hearts and minds of the people, is that this is a war for democracy and for the defense of freedom, and this is why we have to keep fighting. And what is not being said is that this is a completely irrational point of view which could lead to our own destruction. And this is why I say that we have to get a grip of what is going on with the fight for our hearts and minds to be able to understand what's going on geopolitically. And we desperately need a strong and loud peace movement in Europe and in Germany again. And this is sort of what motivates me, and I know it also motivates you. We need to get people to realize what is going on, and we need the strong wish for peace from the public, because still the public is in power. They don't feel it, but it's true. The military knows this. If the public says no, this madness stops, and that's what has to happen.
You're pointing out a lot of very important things, but one of the main things you just put your finger on is that there is some sort of interplay here between the propaganda that we see now on German but also Swiss and French TV screens, and this irrationality. And when we say irrational and rational, what we mean is not good and bad. Don't nobody should confuse this. When you say the Russians are acting rationally, you don't mean that it is good that they invaded Ukraine. You mean it makes sense within the frame of reference that is an understandable interpretation of reality, right? And we have different interpretations of reality, and within those, these acts make sense. And especially if we use geopolitics as a frame of reference, then we can understand the Russians, we understand the Ukrainians, we understand the Americans, but the Europeans in a geopolitical framework make no sense. And they also, we have constant contradictions within the Europe, especially the European narrative and the NATO narrative. This constant contradiction that the Russians are gonna overrun all of Europe, but at the same time, also this constant drumbeat in the propaganda, within this propagandistic environment, that Russia is extremely weak, fighting with shovels, running out of weapons, being incapable, having lost millions of men. Human waves is the only reason why they are not defeated yet. So, there are several levels of irrationality going on, but they are working hand in hand, or are probably mutually reinforced with the propaganda we're seeing. For people who don't watch German media, what would you say? I mean, compared to compared to past decades, are we at an all-time high within, like, let's say, German news media in this wave of propaganda? Because there is media that is not propaganda. There is a part of media and a part of the news that we could describe as maybe not perfect, but trying to not be propaganda, trying to be information, and we need to pick that apart. But first, how bad do you think the situation currently is compared to previous periods?
Well, I agree with everything that you've said, and I'd say that it is, in fact, this is my analysis. It is worse than it has ever been, because we are in this what you call cognitive warfare, which is like the most advanced form of manipulation that exists today, and this is ongoing every day. And these are official statements from NATO documents, which I've all read on cognitive warfare. This is the analysis, and of course, I agree with you that from a humane and humanitarian perspective, and from the perspective of democracy and how we should treat each other, no war can ever be justified. No war can ever be understood, and of course that is true for the Russian invasion as well, which is illegal, and it has brought great suffering and death and destruction to the people. So I absolutely agree with you on this one. But my criticism would be that the narrative that is being controlled and brought forth by the media right now is not, as you've correctly said, it's completely contradictory in itself, but it is also, well, it is not grounded on the geopolitical reality, because we have, for example, in Germany, we had a politician, Egon Bahr, who was very much interested in the peace movement. And he said that whenever in international politics someone tells stories about democracy and human rights, you can forget about this. In international politics, people don't care about democracy or about human rights. All they care about is power. And this was true back then, and this is true right now. And what we have is this very simple narrative that it is a fight for democracy, and at the same time, you need fear. You need to put the fear in the hearts and minds of people. And we have strategic papers from the German military and the military all around. They know that the feeling of being threatened has to be held high. And so people need to feel threatened by Russia. We need to have this constant repetition. If you think at this scandal with the drones recently, this constant repetition of there's this direct threat from an imperialist Russia, which wants to conquer not only Ukraine, but Ukraine is just the starting point. And from there, they're going to take more and more countries in Europe. This threat has to be held high. People have to feel this threat. And we know statistically that there's a very high a correlation between this fear and the support for the war, the support for the weapons, and yeah, this, just to give you one example, because you said how high sort of is how strong is the propaganda. It is stronger than it has ever been before, and it's done on a very, very highly professional level in all areas. It's not just, that we have official media, because we have the Digital Services Act as well, which directly affects how we can communicate via platforms such as X or Instagram. So all the social networks are affected here. We have this fight against disinformation, and I've published a couple of articles, and I know that there are other researchers who do the same, where we clearly say that the fight against disinformation is absolutely dishonest, because you cannot define disinformation. It's not been defined. And as a specialist for cognitive warfare, I have been invited to like these strategic talks where you have people from the media, we have military there, you have representatives of the German government there, and specialists, researchers, etc. I don't know why I'm still being invited to these meetings, because my take on this is clear, and I say that propaganda and democracy, they just don't go together, and cognitive warfare and democracy is a direct contradiction. But in these meetings, it is being discussed that, well, we need to defend against Russian disinformation, and this battle is crucial. And then, if you ask, excuse me, can you quantify Russian disinformation? Can you say how much there is and what it is? you get a lot of strange looks, and you're quickly isolated, like on this in these meetings, because everyone agrees on the fact that you have to fight disinformation, and you have to, get your own message across. And how professionally this is done. Just one example: we have Haldenwang, who used to be the chief of the German intelligence service for the interior, and he said that they have a department in the German intelligence who observe very clearly which narratives are circulating in the media every day. And if a narrative comes up, maybe through the media that you have mentioned, the sort of maybe alternative media, or media that is interested in an honest talks about geopolitics, that are interested in peace, whatever these media might be, if there comes up a narrative that goes against, for example, the huge Russian threat, etc., they have specialists, they have special teams that on a daily basis can react, and they can counter these narratives, and they have their own experts and their own TV shows that are going to be produced very quickly to instantly counter that narrative. And that is just one example. I'm not talking about the 28 centers of excellence that NATO has that work on this topic. I'm not talking about, that in Germany alone, the state is spending roughly 100 million a year on public relations, which is sort of a euphemism for propaganda. So we have a lot of effort, we have a lot of money put into this. It's done in a very professional level. From a researcher's perspective, I can say that from a psychological point of view, they know the human weaknesses very well. They have, exploited and discovered them in the past 120 years. So they know very well what our weaknesses are, where they can target us. And that's being done right now on a scale that I've never seen before. And my fear is that it might lead us to along the path of our own destruction if the people don't wake up heavily because of media such as yourself, which is very valuable. And I know there are a lot of other channels to do the same. People are waking up, but that's desperately needed right now.
Yeah, and we just need to make it clear, because it is difficult to fathom, but it is absolutely true. What you're talking about is not something that NATO and the German government do behind very secretive closed doors somewhere in a bunker. They do that out in the open. There is like these meetings on cognitive warfare. There are experts on cognitive warfare. There are conferences on cognitive warfare. NATO publishes these papers because this is a societal approach. So this is part of the entire madness, and the psychological impact of public messaging is understood at least since Freud and his nephew Mr. Bernays. So this is now more than 100 years that this entire PR campaign and so on are being studied academically, and it's just hard to imagine. But this is part and parcel of how apparently European and Atlantic societies, transatlantic societies also work these days. That this is part of the way the state also functions. That they have these different arms and branches that work also on how to influence. And from our last discussions, I've learned that within NATO's cognitive warfare, maybe not doctrines but documents, there's a clear division between cognitive warfare toward outside populations and toward inside population, right? Toward the own population. And that's highly problematic. And apparently it's not even understood by these people how dishonest their approach is when they say we need to defend against the cognitive warfare of others, but we need to apply our own cognitive warfare to our own population in order to do the good thing. Can you maybe speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Just think of the statement that we're going to defend democracy and we're going to defend an open discourse by censoring everyone who's against that. That doesn't make sense. If you say you're for an open discourse, then you have to respect that there's one man, one vote, one voice. This basic principle of democracy, which is not being respected at all by NATO's cognitive warfare and by these statements. And well, it's true. It's like you said, we have discussions ongoing right now, just that you see how deliberate and how advanced these manipulation techniques are. We have discussions ongoing that say, well, we have 5 domains of action for NATO right now, that this is Earth, land, and sea. And then we have space and cyberspace. So these 5 domains of operation we already have. And right now, the discussion is ongoing for the creation of a 6th domain of operations. And this is what, cognitive warfare is all about. And this 6th domain of operations, that's going to be us, the human being. So the whole this distinction that is being discussed is it going to be the human domain? So that's going to be the whole human, or is it only, and only in parentheses, is it only going to be the human brain? But it is clear that this 6th domain of operations, it will come, and it will officially make every human being in the direct center of, this very advanced form of, cognitive warfare, psychological warfare, of manipulation techniques, of which we are the target every day. So that has to be made clear. And just to add to what you have said, it is, I absolutely agree that it is shocking how much of this is public. So when writing the book, I did not have contact with a whistleblower who sort of sent me over secret documents. If you know what to look for, you could, after the publication of this book, this has changed a little bit, but you still can, if you look hard enough, you can still find a lot of official documents of NATO on cognitive warfare, where they say that we need the 6th domain of operations, and the goal of cognitive warfare, well, it could be foreign populations. If you convince them, for example, to get rid of their leader, then you don't start a war because you achieve your goal via the means of cognitive warfare. But they also say that, well, of course, and this is the cover story, we are being under attack by Russian cognitive warfare, which exists. We're being under attack by Chinese cognitive warfare, which exists. And now we have to counter. And this is the cover story, because the military always says that they're just defending themselves and that they're countering foreign threats. But this is, like you said, it's dishonest, because the nations which are the strongest when it comes to the manipulation of the hearts and minds of people, that's the Western nations. Because, as you said, there has been a science, a professional science called public relations, that has been developed for over 100 years, how to manipulate the people. And right now, this is, yes, a lot of it is in the open. On the other hand, some of it, and that is on a large scale, that is secret. And that is what a lot of people don't know right now. A lot of people have not heard that NATO has decided that they need what they call a resilience strategy. And with resilience strategy, they mean that they have to be able to defend themselves. So, of course, they need to strengthen their military. They need new tanks, they need new missiles, they need new fighter jets and helicopters and whatever. So they have hundreds of billions right now that are going off the taxpayers' money. That's why people are getting poorer, but that would be another part of the story. That is getting into, the military spending, which is, being raised significantly in Europe right now. We have in Germany roughly, just to give you the scale of this, we have roughly 200 billion every year right now, which are being spent on the military. Incredible sums of money. When someone says, well, could we do something for schools or for children or for the elderly who are poor? No, we don't have the money for that, but we have 200 billion for the military. That's a good idea. And part of this is being spent on resilience, which now, and this is where it becomes interesting, which now is also the fight for the hearts and minds, because we need resilient societies, and resilient societies mean resilient citizens, and resilient citizens, of course, mean citizens who think and feel the right things. And when it comes to NATO, when it comes to belief in our democracies, when it comes to the belief that, other countries are being governed by dictators and by just evil people. So all this fight for the hearts and minds is part of NATO's resilience strategy. And this resilience strategy has been distributed all over the NATO member states, and it has been individually tailored to suit each nation. So it's being done, again, very professionally. And this resilience strategy, and that's the problem that I have and that we have as researchers, that is secret. So we don't know exactly what is written there. And we don't know how much of these 200 billion in Germany alone go into the direct or indirect control of people's hearts and minds, of their thoughts, feelings, and actions. But I would guess that it is quite a lot, and it is a problem that we need to demand that this resilience strategy is made public, and we need to know exactly what's going on, because the fear is that with the mounting, the best word to describe it probably is insanity, the mounting insanity of Europe and of Germany, if they are this war hungry, is that not only will more tanks, missiles, etc. be bought, but the hatred and the fear of Russia and the hatred of Russians, that's going to mount to a level where it could lead us into war. So these are developments that are very dangerous. Some of them are in the open, some of them are secret, but the path is clear, unfortunately.
Yeah, and this is exactly the problem. This is not just a few sinister people in a room plotting against the general population. It's a sociological phenomenon with action and reaction, and it comes in different parts. And some of them we are aware about. Others we are trying to reverse engineer to figure it out.
Yeah.
I had these discussions, also with Patrick Baab and journalists, to ask them how come that in a liberal free society we do have this very propagandistic environment. And he said, look, it's not that difficult to explain, because what is being expected. And since a lot of journalists in Germany are not hired for a normal salary, but they work basically like contractors. If they don't get new contracts, then they adjust what they propose, and you get kind of you have a natural mechanism to get people to fall in line. So one of the things we don't understand is how much now of the media analysis that you are doing, how much of that is actually part of NATO's resilience strategy and is being somehow directly influenced, and how much of that is actually just done by an epistemic community of like-minded individuals who then happen to swim to the top a la Noam Chomsky, right? And then direct everything. But do you have a hunch about how much of the propaganda we're currently seeing is actually intentionally implemented, and how much is just being done very, very naturally? And can you maybe tell us a little bit of, like, in your analysis about the Tagesschau, about the daily news segment, why it is that you think it is so well structured, well done, and implemented propaganda?
That's a very good question. And unfortunately, I have to say that I cannot prove how this works. So it is part of propaganda that in the end, a lot is being done in secret. And we only see the surface, and the surface would be the news coverage. We know that if you look at the figures, it's what you have just said, that of course there are a lot of journalists fighting for their survival, their financial survival, so to speak, for their jobs, and they write what they know is being expected. So this would be a sociological problem. I'm not a sociologist, but I can understand that, of course, if your job is at stake and your income is at stake, you're gonna adjust what you write and what you where you direct your research. So this is part of the problem. We also know that if you count the journalists and you count the PR experts in Western nations, it's not the same in every nation, but roughly we have 60-40. So we have 60% PR specialists and roughly 40% who are journalists. So that gives you an idea of how lopsided this whole is, the media business. So we have more people interested in spinning news and in tweaking news and in controlling hearts and minds than we have people who are interested in true independent news coverage. So that is part of the problem. And I can only, with my analysis from the Tagesschau, I can only say that these things exist, that we have always starting with a very neutral kind of news coverage, where I call this, and this is called in psychology, the so-called foot in the door principle, because you're discussing with someone, and even if you have different opinion, the best would be for if one person wants to convince the other, sort of to get your foot in the door and to have some kind of common ground where the other person agrees with you. And from that, you can expand. So that means if a person has already agreed with you once, then they're more likely, this from research, to agree with you again. And this is what the Tagesschau does. So they have a neutral coverage at first, where they convince people that they are serious and they are neutral and they are unbiased. And then it goes on, and you have lots of one-sided news coverage afterwards. You have, as we said, you have news coverage on Russian war crimes and not on Ukrainian war crimes. We have news coverage on the Ukrainian point of view in this war, and not on the Russian. You have people saying, well, Ukraine needs security guarantees, and you don't say Russia needs it. And then all of a sudden, which was to me also a surprise, you have, for example, the discussion about, well, should NATO soldiers be sent into Ukraine to secure peace? And once again, when you think about that, well, NATO, as Peskov recently said, I'm Kremlin's spokesperson, well, NATO is, from the Russian point of view, directly at war with Russia because they're providing weapons. We know this. We have US military specialists who are in Europe and they are in Germany, and they are providing the targets for the Ukrainian missiles hitting very important targets in Russia, so they are directly helping in targeting Russian mainland. And that's why, understandably, Russia says, well, NATO is at war. And if you have the discussion, should Germany, should Europe, should NATO send soldiers into Ukraine, the least you could do is to mention that Russia does not want this, that Russia says this is absolutely intolerable, this is a red line, and we're going to react accordingly, whatever that means, if that should happen. And this is only, either it is not mentioned at all in the Tagesschau, or it is only a tiny side note, and then you have the whole discussion, should NATO send soldiers into Ukraine? So that the viewer, who maybe has the foot in the door, he thinks that, well, this is kind of a neutral news coverage, thinks that maybe we should send soldiers into Ukraine, forgetting that we're part of the war, to secure peace, which is ridiculous, and this is very dangerous. And then after this, you have a young boy or a young man who says that, well, I'm just on my way to join the military because I want to defend my country, and I think this is a fantastic idea. And after watching this, I couldn't believe that this was actually part of the Tagesschau, because the informational value is zero. You might as well say, okay, we have here a random guy on the street who's a peace activist and who thinks that it is crazy for NATO to send soldiers to Ukraine, and who says that he would never take a weapon in his life because he'll just end up fighting for rich people he doesn't know, so that they get richer and his life is being sacrificed. You could as well have that guy, but you don't. You have the guy who says, I'm joining the military. And this is in the largest news show in Germany with 10 million people watching. So they think, well, maybe if young people see this, I should go as well, because that sounds convincing. And so you have this, I can only observe it on a surface level. I'm sorry right now as a researcher that I cannot give further proof for this. We have proof on we know what Hallenwang said from the German intelligence service. We know what is being said in the NATO documents. We know that we have resilience strategy. We know that from Chomsky and Herman's analyses, how biased and how the filters work for propaganda. We know all these things. I would be happy to be able to prove more. At this point, I'm sorry, I can only look at it on a surface level, and I can only point out how it is being done and how very, very dangerous this is for Europe, for Germany, and how irrational this is. And this part, I can only say it again, this path of madness, that it has to be stopped.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And, there's nothing to apologize for, because one of the hallmarks of societies that use and deploy large-scale propaganda in order to direct their societies is that the black box, the decision-making process, becomes harder and harder to understand, because you don't have access to it anymore. It shields itself, right? This is why in the 70s and 80s we actually had entire fields that were like informally called Kremlinology, by people who just read the Pravdas, the different Soviet propaganda propaganda outlets and try to reverse engineer what does it mean if this kind of information is written in that kind of outlet. What can we infer rationally about what this means for the upper process? And we are unfortunately now going in that direction in Europe as well, where we lose the ability to understand how the decision-making process works and what is being pushed intentionally and what is actually part of the ideology behind all of this. And what you just outlined is, though, that we can observe in this most important daily news show in Germany, that there is definitely this strategic sequencing of information. How do you feed information in order to then solicit a response within the unsuspecting viewer of or those who are still susceptible to this kind of influence mechanisms? And those were things that were not there in the past. Or have you looked at that? Can we say that 15, 20 years ago, this kind of strategic sequencing was just not part and parcel of the daily way the news worked?
Well, what I know from my research is that, first of all, you can say that yes, we've had propaganda for a long time, and on the other hand, that it's gotten to a point where it is sort of it's on a scale that is so massive and so widespread that we haven't had this before. And what is definitely true, I mean, if you think 10 or 15 years back, we had the war on terror, so we had people convinced that you need to go to foreign countries, whether this be a de facto illegal and unprovoked war of aggression, for example, against Iraq, which was not that often labeled as an unprovoked illegal war of aggression. So it was possible back then. So there must have been a lot of propaganda back then. We have analysis, for example, from movies who date back to the 90s and 80s. We know that now. We learn that now, that thousands of movies have never been produced because they would have needed, for example, a tank or a plane or whatever. And the Pentagon said no. So we know that a lot of propaganda has been going on for a very long time. But I have looked at, these war games in the Cold War, and now that simulate the conflict between, Russia or the Soviet Union and NATO. And it was clear that this conflict would have destroyed all of Europe. So that is the red line that you can see. Whatever the government was, whatever the NATO doctrine was, it changed from massive retaliation to flexible response and all these fantastic names that in the end didn't change the outcome of this conflict. But what they said, and this is something that people should keep in mind, and this is something that can sort of strengthen their back so that they know that what they think and what they feel matters. All the time, we had military saying, we would wish to have this conflict. We had in the US, we had generals and this was the National Security Council and the Pentagon, who said that, well, we would like to have this war. We would like to finally, once and for all, get rid of Russia. And, we could throw hundreds of thousands of bombs all over Russia, nuclear bombs, and we could terminate Russia, destroy Russia, annihilate Russia. And they always said that the biggest problem we have is that public opinion would not support us. So here you have a clear indication, and I looked at old news coverage in Germany from a magazine that's called Der Spiegel, which I wouldn't recommend right now. But they were very critical of these war games, and they had very good analyses of what was going to happen with Europe and with Germany. And there you can clearly say that, yes, the media in the Cold War was different to how the media is now. What you have right now is sort of an unconditional support for whichever madness seems to be the official direction of politics and military, and you have almost no criticism. Again, you have people who are criticizing, or even people who are analyzing what's going on. They are being shunned. They are being attacked. And isn't it interesting what you said, that there was professional study in the Cold War of how Russia works, right? That people were trying to understand Russia. Right now, it has become a smear word if you have intellectuals who say, I think I understand what Vladimir Putin thinks, what he wants. I understand his strategy. That in German, you have this word Putin verstehe. It's just someone who understands Putin. And that is a smear word. That is to put someone down, where in fact it should be a highly valued profession to, even if you consider him your enemy, to understand your enemy. And this is transported in the media as well, which has drastically changed. So I can only agree that, yeah, it's never been as bad as it is now. And we can only say that we are obviously at a point of culmination of processes that have been going on for a very long time. We have very much power in the hands of very few people. And we have, again, this is a little bit of going a side track right now, but if you think of Nick Hanauer, who is a billionaire, he said that a couple of years ago, that what he fears is that the people are going to stand up, they're going to pick these, forks, and they're going to attack the rich people because social injustice is so great and the differences in wealth are so great. And right now, what you apparently have is that the difference in wealth is now greater than it has ever been. And obviously, there's a lot of fear among the elites, and this fear is being transported down through the media, but not as a fear of the rich losing their wealth, but as a fear of an external aggressor or the fear of a virus or whatever. And these fears are being pushed, they're being held high at a very unreasonable level. And it could well mean that we are not only at the culmination point of this propaganda, but we are also once again at the culmination point of geopolitical tensions, of military tensions. And right now, the fear is that it only takes a spark to light up the whole mess. And right now is the best moment to realize that these wars, they are being fought by people who are very rich, who need to, well, extend their wealth. And it's the poor people on the battlefield who are dying. And if, you think of, I forgot his name right now, but it's a Marine who was in the US in the 1930s, the most decorated Marine. He said that he wrote the book to Hell with War. And he said that, well, we need only one thing basically to stop war, which is whenever there's a war, we need to establish this rule that whenever there is a war, no one can earn more than the common soldier on the battlefield. And that will stop war altogether. So I think along these lines, we have to think as well. Yeah. It's wars for profit. It's fear of those who are very rich into a sort of handing down these fears to the people right now. And it could blow up.
Yeah, this is one of the places where academic Marxism as an interpretative prism helps to understand how the forces of unfeathered capitalism then actually create certain of these sociological pressures that then lead to propaganda in the end, also like rechanneling fear and anger against internal against the internal to the external, and then use as an exhaust valve. But we're going a little bit too far there into abstraction. Let's rather go back one more time to sorry, what was it I was thinking about? The way that this propaganda machine that how do we differentiate propaganda from proper kind of information? And a lot of people think, oh, information is just what actually happened in the world, but it's not just that, right? It's how things are framed, how things are presented, what is being presented, and how do we make sure, or how would we test that we are not part of this? Thought experiment. Let's assume you and I, we were actually the target of real Russian cognitive warfare. Let's just assume that. And they managed to get to us. So we unwittingly became Putin's useful idiots, right? Mm-hmm. And we are actually doing the Kremlin propaganda for them. How would you and I start to understand that that's what's going on? Or how do you understand whether somebody is engaged in propaganda or in like legitimate kind of defending of their opinions within the public space?
That's a very good question. Well, I'd say it very much depends on what picture you have of humans and of the human mind and personality. And I have one where I say it is possible for us That's what Kant said, that it is possible for us to actually use our reason. So, and if you say, well, we could be the targets of Russian cognitive warfare, of Chinese cognitive warfare, or maybe German cognitive warfare, then I'd say, well, what this cognitive warfare would do, it is try to sway us with irrational arguments by stirring our emotions. And it doesn't work with arguments that you say, okay, what's the geopolitical point of view of these and different actors? And it is very one-sided. So the best way to convince people and to justify for yourself your point of view is that you look at different contradicting messages and pieces of information. You can say that, okay, we have the piece of information that NATO has expanded eastwards. We have the piece of information that we had a coup d'etat 2014 in Ukraine, but we also have the piece of information that we have the UN Charter, which forbids wars of aggression, and that, the Russian military, the Russian war, which they ironically call military invention, which it is, or just an intervention, which it is not. It is a war. So that is illegal. And then you have different pieces of information that you can put together for yourself, and then you discuss it with smart people, and then you come to this conclusion. So that's what I would urge people towards, that they go beyond these frames of democracy, of freedom, and maybe also these stories that it is to help children or to help the poor people. Wars are never about poor people. Wars are never about children. These are the tools that are being used to steer us into a certain direction. So I would say that it is propaganda when it is one-sided, when not both sides of an argument are presented, or of a point of view or of an issue are presented. So we need different perspectives. We need different sources of information. And once you have that, which takes time, you can say that, okay, now I'm able to discuss it with my friends, to discuss it with different people, share their opinion based on logic, based on arguments. And that's sort of how we get out of this this constant manipulation of our feelings. And it takes time. But I'm convinced that we can do this. And for this, and this is why channels like yours are so valuable, for this, we need different pieces of information. And we need, and by the way, Smedley Butler was the name of the general I'm talking about.
War is a racket.
Exactly. We need this insight that war is a racket. We need this insight that wars are being fought not for us, not for the defense of liberty, whatever, and that we need true democracy. That is the biggest counterpart to wars. That is the biggest counterpart to the abuse of power. We need a true democracy, once again, which we don't have at the moment, to let people decide for themselves if they want war. That's another precondition of Smedley Butler. Whenever there's a war, the decision whether to wage this war or not is to ask the people if they want this war. And only the people who are fighting in the war have the right to decide whether there's war or not. You don't see Trump, Putin, Zelensky, Starmer, Macron. You don't see these Merz. You don't see these people on the battlefield holding a gun. No, it's others who do the job. And if they had to fight, the war would be over right now. So this is another thing that we have to keep in mind. What's actually going on? Who is profiting from war? And we need true democracy as the biggest counterpart.
Yeah, so very good points. But just to come back to how people should check for propaganda, I mean, this was a very useful tip to say, like, check for, is this information or is whatever's being thrown at you trying to solicit an emotional response rather than an intellectual one? And secondly, is it rational? Does it make sense if you think about the different steps of the argument? I mean, is there something else that people should try to watch out for in daily life to distinguish, honest kind of representations of opinions from propaganda?
Exactly. And there's only one thing that I would add that it is important, and that's what the Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, so that's like the institution that cares about the political formation of...
Wait, this is so beautiful. Bundeszentrale für politische Bildung, like, so the National Central for Political Education.
Exactly. And in Germany...
They have that in Germany.
Yeah, so, and they have to know about propaganda, right? They have their own definition of propaganda, and they say that it is always part of propaganda to not present all sides of an argument. So that is, if it is one-sided, always be suspicious, because then it's probably propaganda.
Okay, those are all very good things to look out for, and I'm very glad for all of these practical tips. Jonas, we will have you on, I will have you on the program again. People who want to follow you, who speak German, they should go to your German YouTube channel. I will link that in the description. Is there any other place where you sporadically or so publish things, maybe also in English?
In English, unfortunately, right now, no, but I'm gonna try to expand that. But for all the German and Austrian and Swiss audience, you can find me on Instagram, and you can find me on X and on Telegram. So that's where I constantly post and inform about my work. And I just want to say thank you as well for this fascinating talk. I think it was interesting, and to me it was also inspiring. And I want to thank you too for your very, very valuable work that you do every day.
Thank you very much, and likewise. I mean, the fact that you start now also to distribute this widely is very, very important. So please continue that, and we'll talk again. Jonas Tögel, thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you.